Fungai, how are you doing, my brother? How are you?
Kwesi, I'm good. How are you doing?
I am awesome. It's been a while, hasn't it?
It's been a while. We're still surviving.
Yes. Fungai, we'll sit down and talk extensively. I know today is a short version of this interview. We will do another interview with much more volume in there, right? But for right now, we are looking at how other Africans, so to speak, right? How people from other parts of Africa view Ghana. Let's start with you. I worked with you, full disclosure. Like I said, Fungai is a former colleague and all that. I worked with you, and the platform on which we worked was very continental in nature. We met people from all over Africa, right? We used to call it the United Nations, back then, if you remember. I'm talking about Sarah reporters. Fungai, right now, how do you see Ghana? Ghana as a country, Ghana as a brand, all of that. How do you see Ghana?
Okay, so Ghana has been historically one of those pioneers in African freedom, African liberation. We're talking about back in the day. But if I'm gonna put it in context, according to Zimbabwe, everybody knows that Robert Mugabe was inspired very much by Kwame Nkrumah back in the day, and during his political upbringing, as I would say, he stayed and taught in Takoradi, where he married our very first lady, Sally Hayfron, who was from Takoradi, and everybody adored Sally. Everybody respected Sally until she died of kidney failure in the early 1992, I think. But then Robert Mugabe, who was also perceived to be this giant of African liberation and everything, before Mandela, married Grace Mugabe, and then things turned south. So at that time, when he was married to this Ghanaian regal stateswoman, actually, he was organized, he was revered throughout the world, as this African liberator. Up to this day, it's just the other day, my mother actually requested to watch a documentary about where Sally Hayfron came from. And then this blogger who's on a motorbike, I can't remember his name, rides into the place, and then they have a Robert Mugabe library in Takoradi, and then they showed us where he lived. So you could see the humbleness. But then Sally Hayfron herself as a human being, and according to what Zimbabweans and everybody else knows, she was very disciplined, very organized, and there is no way Mugabe would have done it a different way. They had one child, the first child, and that was Namudzenyika, meaning the struggles of the world, of the country. That was the true translation of his name.
Wow.
And he died whilst Robert Mugabe was incarcerated in Rhodesia, which is now Zimbabwe, by the oppressors. And Sally had, taken care of this child by herself in Ghana. And then, she had to bury him by herself. So when I look at Ghana, I see that. I see what Ghana had done for the people of Zimbabwe, bringing up this very intellectual, very deep, very thoughtful, very nurturing woman. And then I also reflect on the historic. I think Ghana was one of the first independent countries in Africa.
The first.
The
South
first.
of the Sahara.
He correct me there.
South of the Sahara, yes.
Radio, contract.
So Africa was in the prime of learning how to be free, you see. So fast forward, I know you've told your viewers that me and you work together.
Mhm.
And the current president now, me and you had the privilege of interviewing him at a time when an African giant had fallen.
Yes.
And this was Chinua Achebe.
Chinua Achebe.
And his family organized this memorial symposium out in, was that Providence, and we went there. And then in the backdrop of all of that, Nelson Mandela had just died. So we got to see John Mahama trying to be in two places at one time. And me and you, as daring as we were, we followed him after he left the stage, and we followed him to the back. And he gave us a moment to talk to him. And in that experience, he had the protection of the Secret Service of the United States as a, you know, a statesman from Ghana.
Yep.
And he gave us that attention that I say to myself, wow, you know, African politicians are not approachable. They're not approachable. You cannot get there and just walk. You cannot see them, you know, because they have.
We contrast that with. You remember when we also covered the event in DC when President Obama at the time invited all the African leaders to Washington DC.
Right.
And do you remember that journalist from which country was he from? I think it was from one of the Congo or something like that, who was harassed by.
He was an activist. His name
yes,
was Nyango Jax.
He was brutalized, and for some strange reason, even the cops couldn't do much. They could, because the cops couldn't touch the
they had diplomatic immunity,
diplomatic coverage.
They brutalized him on the
just to buttress your point about how African, you know, how approachable African leaders can be.
Yeah. So he stood out to me. He stood out. And I gave him the much respect. And I remember what he was wearing. He had actually jeans here and a real jacket on top and a shirt. Very casual. And I have to say that I think Ghana has a gem right now.
Wow.
I might I might go wrong with other people who think otherwise. But I think when you have a leader that allows you space, you know, as a regular person, that's fine. That's a good sign. And I'm saying this, yeah, because we've chased around so many African leaders, myself and yourself, and we've seen how it's almost impossible to get a word out of them. You know,
and you also remember when Adiola barged into Mugabe's space, and
yes,
it became like an international.
And all they were asking was, Robert Mugabe, you are here at the inauguration of Jonathan at that time in Nigeria, and Mugabe had put in like 37 years of being the stronghold, you know, president of Zimbabwe, and his handlers harassed and attacked, you know, Shiwore and Adiola at that time. And then they didn't end there, because they went back and said, who are these people who dare ask this president when you're going to leave power, when people are going to come to your country to see an inauguration of somebody else? And it didn't end well for some of us, because they figured out, okay, you work with them, therefore you must be part of you know, the people that want to question when we're going to leave power.
Mm.
But
Anyway.
when I talk from the United States of America as a diasporan, you know, from Africa, Ghana in the past years has always opened its doors to African American folks.
Mm-hmm.
They have what I think they call
The dual citizenship.
yeah, but then there's an event that actually attracts.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes,
so
yes,
I'm
yes.
I'm constant.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I forget
It
it.
happens around Christmas and New
Yes,
Year. People ring. Yeah, so a lot of African American folk ask me, "Are you going to Ghana this year to ring the New Year?" And I'll be like, "What are you talking about?" They said, "You don't know. There's these parties," and they show me pictures, and a lot of people besides South Africa. You understand? Besides South Africa, Ghana is their, you know, their bucket list, on their bucket list. They want to go to Ghana, and they want to go because of the reception, because of the openness, because of also uh, I had to tell you this story. I met this guy all dressed up in his kente cloth and gold. He's like, I'm an Ashanti king or whatever he was saying, you know, in Brooklyn.
yeah.
And he says, "You're African, tell them what this means." And I was like, okay.
Um.
So I think we're on the right track. Ghana is on the right track
Mm,
because Africa needs to open up. Africa needs to be, you know, receptive.
mhm,
Africa needs to remind the world of its rich history because we live in an America today that thinks that America has been white or always been white. No, America was never white. The white folks brought the black folks here in chains. The
mm,
black folks, in turn, built this. They built this because the people that were here first were the Native Americans who were not white. Let's
mm,
get that straight. They were
mhm,
not white. So the people that came here in chains actually were the Ghanaians, Nigerians, all those people in the slave trade
mm.
that
Fungi,
charged.
talking about, sorry to interrupt, but talking about Ghana and Nigeria, what have you heard about Ghanaian food, for instance? As you remember that restaurant from across the street where we used to go get the food from?
BD, yeah, I
BD, and
remember.
they would serve all different types of, African, a collection of the. What have you heard about African food? I mean, about Ghanaian food. Is it a brand? Is it something that you particularly heard anything about?
It's always been a contentious conversation in the sense that uh, I had to try both jollof rices from Ghana and from I, and not being biased, I've always felt like Ghana used to kick. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
Because Nigeria to me has been like a copycat in a lot of things, trying to hold uh, authority over a lot of things. But Ghana has been authentically.
You're not planning on going to Abuja anytime soon, are you?
I was actually in a place in Harlem last night, and
Mhm.
they said I can't get in because I'm dressed like this. So I say, listen, is this a Nigerian place? They said yes. So I asked the door person, who was an African American. I said, I don't think you understand what's going on over here, you know. But what I'm saying is, I get it. Ghana and Nigeria have different flavors, but Ghana has also been just true to itself. in terms of being authentically themselves. And I can actually tell between a Nigerian and a Ghanaian from looking at them and from how they carry themselves.
Give me some pointers. Give me some pointers. What do you see when you see a Ghanaian? What do you see?
I look at the shape of the head, first of all.
Radio, culture. And what else?
But Ghanaians are very proud in who they are. Nigerians are also proud, but there's a difference in their pride. You understand? Ghanaians are true to the fact that this is who we are, and that's the Nigerians are more they're so self-imposing. You understand?
People
Take
think
it
that
or
that's a virtue, though. People think that's actually a virtue. And I think Ghanaians also rub off Nigerians in a lot of ways because, for instance, people think if Ghanaians had the business acumen of Nigerians, for instance, especially the Igbo people, it would be a lot better. So yes, I hear you say that, but I think people don't necessarily see that as a negative.
Yeah, they don't. But I'm speaking as a Southern African who looks at these two, people. I had the opportunity to meet this writer, Nana. What was her name? Oh God.
Nana Bruhammand?
No. Oh, Ama Ata Aidu.
Oh, Ama Ataidu.
Yes. So I met Ama Ata Aidu through another writer who died last year. God rest her soul. Her name was Mishere Mugo. She was from Kenya.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so Mishere Mugo was friends with Ama Ataidu, and Ama Ataidu at that time was living in Zimbabwe. That's back in the 90s, late 90s, yeah. So I got to meet this icon of a woman, who in my perspective was a true African mother. You understand me? If you are in her presence, who did not care about how she perceived Africa and tradition and culture in an English version, because we had to use English to communicate. But she still managed to articulate that motherliness. In that time, Mugabe was still married to the first lady, Sally Hayford, who maintained that standard of what a mother should be. Later on, a mother to a nation. And I'm giving these distinct looks about how Ghana influenced other places, because then when Mugabe married the young wife, who was typically Zimbabwean, who became Gucci Grace to the world, there was a very yeah, that's how she's known, Gucci Grace.
Gucci Grace, wow.
She worried about the Gucci. She wanted to show the world that this is the standard. She didn't want anybody approaching her husband. She wanted to take everything and become hers. But Sally never left that legacy to this day. And like I'm saying, my mom, she's 78, and she requested to see that story about Sally. And it just humbled me all the way down, because right now in Takoradi, where she came from, her nieces live in the same place. They took a tour of the place where they ate, where Mugabe and Sally slept, the school that they taught, and the community. But what you find is the legacy after all of that, because Mugabe ended up dying with a very obscure legacy. You understand that?
That's the extended discussion we're going to have, But as we wrap up, let me ask you, Fungai,
Yeah.
your mother, right,
Uh-huh.
is intellectual in that sense, and is from another generation, and they know Sally Mugabe. Let me ask you,
Yeah.
the current generation who did not meet Sally Mugabe, do
Uh-huh.
they know anything about Sally Mugabe? Is there anything in Zimbabwe that iconizes her? Or is it that because of the way certain Zimbabweans view what's his name, the Robert Mugabe of latter days, that has affected her image also?
It's so sad that we're talking about this because only last week there's some political upheaval going on in Zimbabwe currently, and the current president, who was Robert Mugabe's right hand man, who removed Mugabe in a coup, took over, and now he's trying to stay into power until 2030. This man is 80 something years old. How in the hell are you dreaming to stay into power until 2030 when you took the power from in a coup? But there's been issues about corruption, massive corruption, where his front man, who's a 40, he's probably not 40 yet, who's been siphoning a lot of gold out of the country, private jets and everything. He's been buying popular people with influence, musicians, comedians, social media uh, characters with brand new Mercedes Benzes, with brand new Land Cruisers and all these expensive cars, right? And the hospital system is broken down. So a popular musician who was a recipient of these cars died through a car accident. Him and his three friends, two of his friends, band members, died in the car. He survived. And then he was taken to Sally Mugabe Hospital, which is the biggest hospital that they named after Sally Mugabe. And he died on the hospital bed. There are videos circulating saying, "I want a Panadol, painkiller, pain easy." And he's begging, and he could not get this. He could not get that. So this is the image. My mom is here in the diaspora with me. She was watching, and that pained her. That's the reason why she went back to see who Salim Mugabe was, because she understands that information from before, that this man who gained a vehicle so that he can influence voters for this man who took power from Mugabe to stay in power, died in a Stalin Mugabe hospital that has no painkiller. Oh my God. The image is just jarring to look at. It's painful. If you even try to reconcile with the history of what Salim Mugabe Hospital means, and if that Salim Mugabe would wake up and say, "Really, guys?" Well, that's where we are.
Fungai, like I
Yeah.
said, this is a discussion that cannot be had in the space of one show. Even if we were to spend the entire show on
Right.
this, we will be getting back to you for a more extended discussion. We'll look at the politics of both countries, how they have influenced each other, how currently, including, of course, the negative side, like when Al Jazeera did a report in which both our presidents' names popped up in there. But that's a discussion for another day. Fungai, thank you very much for your time today.
All right. Thank you so much for inviting me.
And our best regards to your mom. I hope
I'll
she's
let her know.
enjoying New York.
Thank you so much. Take care, my brother.
And you too. Thank you very much.
All right.